Hello, friends. I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's all fantastic. The bench is clean, but we'll get to that tomorrow because I watched a show this weekend and I want to talk about it. I watched the whole show, all of it, in this weekend, and I want to talk about it. And that show is called Lovecraft Country. Now, when I heard the name of the show, I was immediately knew I wanted to watch it. I'm a fan of H.P. Lovecraft's works. Got to choose words carefully there. I'm a fan of the mythos. I'm a fan of Cthulhu and the dark cosmic horror that he championed, and it didn't take off until after he died, which is not a bad thing because H.P. Lovecraft was unapologetically racist, like super racist. Wrote a manifesto on why black people are just so inferior. I mean, just a very racist man. And it comes through in his works. While he doesn't really abuse a whole lot of people of color in his books, or in his stories, he didn't really write a whole lot of books, he does have characters in his stories that are ape-like, that are villains. They're always villains, right? Or fish-like people. He has these other kind of humanoid races that are always bad people. And anyway, the point is, when I heard the title of the show, I knew nothing about it, but knew I wanted to watch it, and so I watched it. And I ended up watching all of it because it was amazing. It's a really good show, and one of the funnest parts about it is it's like 90% black. The cast is overwhelmingly black, and it's set in black Chicago. It's in the 50s and 60s. Well, it's kind of in all times and all spaces once you get through it all, but it's a very black-centric show, and they did a really amazing job with it. It's each episode is kind of its own little mini movie, and they borrowed from a whole lot of genres, and they gave these black actors and these black characters really strong voices. One of the episodes was so much Indiana Jones, it was ridiculous. And it was awesome. It was so much fun to see those characters. But here's the thing. The part that really gripped me was the blackness, right? And I don't mean that as some sort of like... What I'm trying to say is they made this show in a way that you really felt for the disparity of the black people in that world. In the 1950s, you really felt how horrific it was to be colored. And not in a way that made you feel, yeah, it sucks, right? Like, the stuff that we've done to people of color, people of, it's horrific, right? It's inexcusable. And the show doesn't shy away from it at all. The show leans heavily into it. But the show is also kind of a bit of a comedy. Like, there's a whole lot of really comedic elements to it. And there's a whole lot of really... it doesn't take it too seriously. It takes it seriously. It really puts, the fear of being black. Like, you have this fear of Cthulhu and this fear of the outer dark and these, wizards and creatures that show up in the show. But you also just have a fear of the color of the character's skin. And that's... they did it really, really well. It's really fun. Fun is not the word. I'm screwing this all up because I'm trying to... It's not blaxploitation, which was a whole different thing, where it was... It was black empowerment, but done to like an almost cynical level. This is more like just reality with some awesome characters, right? With some awesome people of color. The actors in this show were phenomenal, like all of them. And they included a Korean, multiple Koreans, but there was a one main character. Well, she's not really she's like a B character that's Korean. They included the Korean War. And they also included a lot of history. I learned stuff watching this show because they tried to tie in a whole lot of what was happening at that time, and because there's some temporal dilation, or whatever you want to call it, we got to see some periods in Black history that were really things I didn't know about. I learned about Black Wall Street. I learned about the race massacre in Tulsa. I had no clue that happened. It was never taught to me in any public education that I had. And I got to go read about it and learn about what happened to that, affluent Black community in Tulsa. And it's terrifying. It's terrifying. It's in some ways, the thing that made this show magic was the magic, the Cthulhu, the Outer Dark, the Elder Gods. That portion of the show was sometimes less horrific than the way the white people were treating the main characters, right? Like the white people and the struggle that existed between the people of color and the main characters and the white people were sometimes way more scary than the horror, quote, horror elements. And it was really fun. The other thing that I really loved was, as a fan of the whole Cthulhu mythos, there's a whole lot of games, board games, video games that lean into that mythos. And it's always the investigator versus the cultists, right? It's always the gas lamp investigator who discovers some horrific thing, and then it's a cult. It's always a cult trying to raise some ancient god, right? In this show, the investigators are the people of color, and the cultists are the white people who have, who basically, I don't want to say stole the magic from the Black people. That's not what happened, but they've withheld the magic from the Black people. So Black people don't have magic. Only the white people do. So you have this investigator versus cultist, but it's also another layer of that is Black versus white. And there's a moment in the next to last episode where I cried. Like, it was so empowering for the main characters. It was so empowering for the people of color in this show that I cried for them. Like, it was awesome. It was really fun. And it was just a wild ride. It's the kind of show that it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Like, there's moments, it has a lot of plot holes. It has a lot of weakness moments where you're just like, ugh. Or there's even just kind of, you just have to take some things as it is. Like, you just, whatever. Like, yeah, that happened. We just move on. But it does that in a way, because of the bit of humor that's injected into the show, because of the bit of absurdity that's injected in this show. This is a show that has hundreds of thousands of gallons of blood. There's blood everywhere. There's horror everywhere. There's nudity. There's sex. There's violence. There's racial tension. There's the N-word gets thrown around quite a bit by the white people because they're very terrible people. But in spite of all of that, the show lets you go on a ride with these characters and just asks you to just kind of let the narrative just be what it is. And it works. It works so well. There definitely were some middle episodes. There's only 10 episodes. There were some middle episodes you're like, what? What is happening right now? Why are we watching this? And you just have to kind of accept it because the show is it's doing more than just telling you a story about these characters versus this cult, right? It's doing more than promoting an all-black cast. It's shining light on a time in American history that is shameful and hurtful and terrible, and a time that we still haven't gotten over as a whole, as a nation, right? A time when people with Confederate flags are storming the White House makes you really stop and think, like, who are the people in this country right now, right? And this show kind of highlighted a lot of why that kind of behavior is atrocious, horrific. It's a good show. Definitely do not watch it with children. Way too much blood and violence and sex. It's campy sometimes. It's exciting sometimes. It has some really funny moments. It has some really sad moments. It has a whole lot of character, and it has an amazing cast. Definitely can't recommend it enough. Just go have fun. Just enjoy it. It's a kind of a popcorn kind of show. Just go for it, right? Let it be what it is. So that's the Lovecraft Country. It's on HBO, HBO Max, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I'm really glad that I watched it. That's all I have for you today. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know to sound smart is elegy. It is a noun meaning a lament for the dead. Modern elegies tend to be unconvincing because the poet so clearly believes in the immortality that an elegy traditionally claims for its subject. Edward Middleton, Professor of English and Comparative Literature at Columbia University. Elegy. E-L-E-G-Y. So eulogy and elegy are different things. This guy seems to think that an elegy is supposed to be poetic. Is that what a lament is? I think it is, right? An elegy. Not a eulogy. That's something different, apparently.